Welcome back to my next video update. In my 2025 battle plan, covering up from spring 2025 all the way down to September-October, where I predicted a volumetric peak similar to the one occurred in December 2024 to January 2025, I laid down a calendar that pinpointed every cyclical turning date that was available. Now that the next cycle is running wild with huge price excursions and plenty of false signals, after the November 5th bottom I predicted, it's time to round everything up. I'll be honest, things are looking grim, and at the time I will upload this video, it's likely that the week will have closed below 108K and thus opening the gates of the second bear cycle for this year. But this isn't the end, and first comes first. Before venturing deep into this 6-month cycle, set to peak between March and May 2026, I want to state this clean and simple. The top isn't in for Bitcoin, or at least it isn't according to the amount of volumes we've seen on October. But how is that possible? The 4 years cycle ended. The halving cycle is the Bitcoin cycle, right? Wrong. What if I told you that there are many cycles and that the 2022 bull run actually ended in late 2024, January 2025, and what came after was the beginning of the next 15-year cycle? What if I told you that we're in for another boring semester, where price will keep revisiting lower prices and also new highs that people will once again top blast, as they say? What if I told you that the October monthly candles serves the same purposes of the daily candle scored in December, which is the one that touched for the first time the excess zone level I marked as a potential inversion price and successfully trapped it until now in a 40% wide range? Would you believe me if I once again reiterated that the halving cycle is a lie, that there are many cycles and market makers are playing a war of attrition against retail traders on every market action? That, right as I was saying on the previous year, would have beared such a volatility that many would quit crypto forever, right as the chance of a lifetime to acquire loads of Bitcoin at discount prices will present, but most of the current investors won't even dream of touching it, as the network would collapse below a certain threshold, or so they believe. Bitcoin, just like any other financial instrument, is more about believing rather than understanding. Once you start studying cyclical analysis, fundamentals, liquidity, precedents, and other man-made constructs cease to be of importance, as one realizes there are bigger forces at play, for which market makers are the emissaries. Besides remarking how we're witnessing epochal changes, for which I'll dedicate a specific video as we get close to Christmas, akin to the 2025 astrology forecast I made last year, I also wish to remark that Bitcoin concluded a 15-year cycle in 2024 and has almost completed the first of the next 14 years of what will likely be the final cycle for Bitcoin, as quantum computers advance rapidly. As Gann teaches, the first year is merely the blueprint of what follows and echoes throughout the years, in an infinite loop. This chance doesn't apply to the rest of the crypto market, which I believe served its purpose of inflating Bitcoin's liquidity pools. And now that institutional players are in, altcoins without ETFs and such will fade into irrelevancy. Speaking of which, I reiterate that alt season ended in September, and only selected runners will follow their cycle if Bitcoin allows them to, like in the case of the privacy coin sector, which I am proud to call bottom bought from every member of the premium rooms, as they were aware with a year in anticipation. And now, let's recollect the premises with a recap of what we witnessed so far under the lenses of my previous predictions. I deeply encourage sensible traders to listen carefully to everything I have to say now, as everything mentioned here is the starting point of what's to come in my 2026 battle plan. Adrenaline junkies can skip directly to minute for the epic predictions. I'm already expecting repetitive questions in the comments for months to come anyways. That said, after the Bitcoin's birth chart marked April 4th as a powerful inversion date, it promptly kicked in right on time after indexes fell on the multi-year one-by-one support during the so-called tariff dump. Bitcoin led the way into a stormful run-up to the December-January highs, officially ending the shortest ever bear market in Bitcoin's history on May. As the 2025 impulse up started on the cleanest retest of the 2024 spring equinox top at 74K a couple months before, it found a confirmation with a swing up at 96K on May 7th. The first date I predicted in my 2025 calendar, and started picking up, disseminating a huge wave of imbalance at 78K. 85K, 88K, 95K, and 108K. The last one has been cleared out during the autumn sell-offs, but all of the others are still there, and sooner or later they will be cleared out. The first new top got scored on May 22nd, a couple days before Saturn began its newborn 30-year cycle, and thus generating the cycle of 22, which we are still enduring, and I extensively covered in my calendar. On June, the official swing-up lows of this cycle after the new 112K ADH got in were formed at 99K. Remember this date, as I will be back on it later. Then on July 14th, the top was scored almost near the correctly squared high prices of 125K, where a couple seasoned whales wisely took as an exit. The fact that 125K didn't got hit on this attempt was most likely the reason for their exit, as price topped right below the sentiment trend line of 2025. Makes sense, don't it? As I predicted last summer, after August 13th showed that a top was imminent on the price chart, the Saturn System Force Index, available in the gold package, signaled a shift in trend, very much similar to the one occurred on December-January. A first warning sign that I promptly made public, and that found place as the first crossing node of the decennial square from the 2018 lows, next being on June 2026. That top wasn't the most interesting occurring, though, as 108 weeks from the 2022 cycle lows, Bitcoin topped at 108K. Likewise, after 33 months from the 2022 cycle lows, Bitcoin added 108K points from 15K. After 33 weeks from 2025, Bitcoin scored the 108K lows on August 26th. 108 is an extremely important number, and I covered extensively how 108K is the cyclical midpoint of the whole price structure. We never closed a single week below 108K before the one that's set to open up this Monday, but I'll get back here later. It seemed that the September-October 2025 volumetric peak was frantically getting front-ran, but when the time is right, price will correct, and so the time price squaring that occurred at the end of August, amidst hordes of paper traders catching knives well sure that 108K couldn't be revisited, marked the floor of a last run-up with a lot of potential, as the volumetric peak would have accompanied what should have been the cycle top. While price was running wild in the first week of October for no apparent reasons, there were in fact many to do so. Besides the already mentioned 108K cyclical level retest occurred on time and the imminent volumetric peak, two bear tongue patterns were formed in the summer. One would have triggered sell-off, and the other one a run-up. The downwards bear tongue pattern was set to trigger below 108K by October 10th, targeting 91K. The upward bear tongue pattern is set to trigger above 108K by December 2nd, targeting 139K. We in fact scored the current ADH at 126K on October, right below the same angular resistance that cut every previous attempt at getting above 120K, an obvious shorting point in case of rejection, as I publicly made known on the previous day. And we in fact sold off heavily right on the last day of the downwards bear tongue pattern, being October 10th, getting down to 101K. It's possible that the October 10th numerology helped to stop the sell-off there instead of venturing further south, but what matters is that the pattern is now deactivated, and only the upward one is left. Inversions are confirmed on the weekly time frame first, monthly after, according to Gann. And since that week saw a ridicule amount of volumes, despite what the Terra News promoted after the sell-off, it was pointless and fairly stupid to call it top. Even thought it felt shameful to not do so, along with the hordes of adrenaline addicts waiting for an alt season. It would have been easy to impress a gullible public, but it's not the case of mine. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here watching this long video. After the October monthly candle closed on futures, two facts emerged. First, the October 2025 candle is equal to April 2025, but not the summer tops. And if we look at smaller exchanges with lazier market makers, such as MEXC, it can be comparable to August 2024 as well. It would be weird to end a cycle without a decently sized volumes influx, at the very least comparable to December-January 2025. If anything, this would be the equivalent of the 2022 cycle lows, and, quite coincidentally, the November 5th bottom is astrologically correlated with the 2022 November lows. And no, this isn't the same case of the 2021 bull run, where the November 2021 top occurred with no volumes, as the cycle was already over by then. Likewise, the December 2024 to January 2025 top was the official cycle top of the bull run, which started in 2022. What came after was merely the beginning of a whole new cycle, which isn't technically a bull market until below 180K and neither a bear market until above 108K on the weekly closing price. And for a simple reason I disclosed already. Market makers are crafting the blueprint of what comes next. It's a brand new cycle that marked a top on October, the first of this cycle, as rightfully predicted by a cyclical analysis on volumes. But that shouldn't delude anyone into assuming that we will see another one anytime soon. As I was hinting at the beginning of the video, we are in for yet another ranging semester, a paradise for traders and hell for adrenaline junkies, which will get bored of calling tops and bottoms as soon as we get near spring 2026. If you made it this far, you are worthy of truly understanding comes next. Let's begin by talking prices, which are the reason most of you are here. As I was saying early this year, the trail of imbalance left is your easy mode to survive any corrections of sort. 95K, 85K, and 78K are the 2025 levels of imbalance left to be cleared out. Fail those, and the 2024 imbalance levels at 68K, 48K, and so on comes in play. Bitcoin is basically a gigantic imbalance, and so one could play this game all the way down to 1K, the last level left to be cleared. While someone joked about this level, and others got venally angry when I first mentioned it, it's no joke. But only time will tell. I won't waste words on speculating their cause. It would be mean of me to destroy some folks' hopes for an easy way into riches. What matters is the multi-year structure. The previous 15-year cycle's roof is currently 45K, while the new one, which began on 2024, is currently at 118K and keeps increasing about 1,000 points every 10 days. There are no multi-year bull markets below 118K. There are no multi-year bear markets below 45K. Anything in between is a neutral price range, according to multi-year cycles. Market makers can endure such price excursions, as their average entries are way lower than MicroStrategy wants you to believe. Same cannot be said about market participants who got in the last couple years, and that's precisely why it's appealing to mess inside this range, to further destroy any illusion of relative stability that Bitcoin gives. It's been 27 days since Bitcoin lost the multi-year support of the bull's side, and according to Gann, we should witness reclaiming attempts on the following days: November 10th, November 23rd, December 6th, January 3rd. Sounds familiar? Because the November dates were made public 6 months ago, back when we weren't even close to a price of $118,000. Yet time is circular, and so everything that has to happen is already written in the time chart and will reflect on the price chart when the time is right. For now, we can start by working on the November dates, which were already covered in my previous calendar and are still very much relevant. November 5th scored an extremely important bottom, which is astrologically connected to the November 2022 lows and can be considered a pivotal day in this regard, as it has discounted the November 17th, 22 lows in anticipation of it. Let's recap the November dates. November 5th, 10, 19, and 20, 26. As we said, November 5th was the pivot low, and November 10th is an extremely important day, as it's the next inversion date marked in Bitcoin's birth chart. The previous inversion day was August 26th, where the lows at 108K got scored first. Previously, it was April 4th, which, as we said, marked the first inversion after the January 20th mini bear market began. Previously, it was November 11th, which saw the biggest daily gainer candle scored on Bitcoin, which brought prices immediately to toppish levels. We are once again back at the same date, November 10th, which is also Pi Day, being 314 days after the first day of the year. This day will be hosting an extremely rare astrological aspect, which dates back to the 2008 meltdown, which will last throughout the whole week. It doesn't automatically translate into the same occurrence, but it's statistically relevant and should be accounted for. Should this low hold the retest to occur on November 14th, Being 144 days after the June 22nd lows I previously marked in the calendar under the cycle of 22, which were 99K, of course, then the next swing will be confirmed upwards and should rally all the way to November 22nd, which is of course linked to the cyclically important top at 112K scored on May 22nd, but also to the October 6th top and many other reasons for which there is simply no time to explain further. The whole week of November 17th to 23rd will be wrapped in toppish energy, but still November will be a corrective month. Any impulse will face selling pressure, but when the time is right, price will correct, and the fate of the upward Bayer tongue relies on the retest of 99K, which should occur on November 14th. Said pattern is currently inactive on price until below 108K, but active on time, since we passed the activation day of November 7th, for which we are already witnessing the upward effects. Should this retest fail to occur, things may complicate a bit, but what truly matters is that 99K isn't violated. As I was saying in this post, we are discounting a front-run low. And if the November 19th and 20th days I have noted marks atop, chances are that November 26th will mark another bottom. And whenever it's a lower low or a higher low from November 5th, the destiny of December will be set in stone. After November comes the heated month of December. If Bitcoin keeps following this alternance of tops and bottoms on a seasonal basis, we should logically expect another low on December, and it's precisely what I was anticipating on my previous calendar. But nothing stops this yearly low to occur after a sell-off from higher prices, mostly favored by the upward Bayer tongue pattern and a successful higher low formed on November 26th against November 5th. To put in perspective, we would be ranging inside the gigantic monthly candle of October, spanning from 126K down to 101K. The price excursions will be enormous and won't surely stop here in December. As I was saying, it all depends on whenever the November 26th is a higher or lower low for November 5th. December sees the following dates as being relevant: December 1st and 2nd, 10 and 12, last but not least December 21st, which is where I expect the yearly low to hit. December 1st lines with the anniversary of the October 10th sell-off. It's likely that we will witness the same behavior of the second week of October. A top on Monday being December 1st or Tuesday being December 2nd, which could be 139K or lower depending on the behavior of November, to be sold off for the rest of the week. December 10th and 12th are the anniversary of 108K, which should be retested once and for all. Following December 21st, which as we said should mark the yearly lows and marks an anniversary with the April lows at 74K. Again, the chances of a retest are high. After the winter solstice, where the yearly low should be scored, January will follow through to be looked at for the following dates: January 4th and 5th, January 8th, January 20th, and January 26th. January 4th and 5th needs no explanations, as they are a natural date, being the 3/1 on time, which will mark the end of the supposed bottom to have formed on the previous December weeks. Following January 8th, which is the anniversary of the January 2025 swing up lows at 80K, and it's also the last cross node of the equinox square, for which we saw previously occurring on October 24th and November 19th to 20th. Once again, toppish energy. There are only 2 dates for February, as of now, being February 2nd and 27th. The first should mark a bottom, the latter a top, while in March we get only one, and it's the most important of them all since September 2024. I talked about this date last year being a vibrational date from the 20 and 30-year cycles, which will be over respectively in 2029 and 2039, and the chances of it being the first swing up of the next cycle, which will last until 2027, where the next volumetric peak will be scored, are high. There are no vibrational dates for the 20-year cycle before March 2026, but one. It's June 29th, 2020. For those who weren't here back then, it was the last bottom before the 10K resistance was ultimately broken off after 2 years of agony, right after the COVID flash crash and before the legendary bull run of 2021. I will add up more as we progress towards winter and hopefully with new vibrational points on price to take measurements. But I feel like the picture here is clear already. The synthetic rune-up of 2025 which I remind isn't a bull market, neither a bear market, until we keep closing weekly candles above 108K, has practically neutered old-fashioned bear markets by cutting off the length of said market phases. The first 2025 bear market lasted about 3 months, the very bare minimum for Gann to consider a successful confirmation of inversion, and by scoring a minus 20% also in the textbook Basilar definition of a bear market according to price analysis. The second one may be right in front of our eyes after the top-on price was scored on October as predicted last year. But once again, as previously said, volumes haven't topped yet, and it's quite coincidental that right as the next 15-year cycle gets set in stone, market makers front-ran everyone 2 times in a row by accelerating sell-offs and subsequent recoveries. Everyone is looking at March 2nd, 2026 being the next pivotal date, and everything that happens in between from a cyclical standpoint is noise. The October monthly candle can be considered a blessing for those patient enough, as it will substantially prevent a Bitcoin fashion bear market, at least until spring. As I said, we will relentlessly range in between the current levels and the chances of touching the previous 15-year cycle roof at 45K are, for now, extremely low. There's only one postulate to be made, and it regards quantum computers and gold. This will be further discussed in the next video update, as I spoke plenty about it publicly already. Just know that as Bitcoin is currently pricing in the November 17th, 22 lows with a week of anticipation. So it does with future systemic risks such as quantum computers and consequently gold winning the battle against Bitcoin for the ultimate value store status. The fact that Bitcoin hasn't seen any decent correction and will likely skip an old-fashioned bear market is solely due to the fact that the market is pricing in the eventuality of a failure into sustaining this battle later in the 2026 May-October cycle. Consider this late-year truce as a possibility to reflect upon this simple question. Has Bitcoin and crypto the same hedge it had more than a decade ago? Or is there something fresher and more prone to speculation ready to be deployed on the markets? Because this question is the only thing that's keeping the stock market afloat. I don't expect people to assimilate everything that has been said here in a single view, so I wholeheartedly recommend to watch this video over and over again until every dot gets connected into your mind. As always, I will update the new calendar every week so that you can stay in touch with the way price unfolds into the time pivots I first gave. See you on the next update.